So, hello and welcome back to the final evening of our recapping of the chapters in the book Lady Night by Tamora Pierce. This is the final book in the Protector of the Small series, and it's a book that I'm so grateful that I got it sent to me because I didn't remember it being as good as it is. And it might have just been the stage of life that I was at when I read it the first time, but I'm really appreciating it a lot more. And, you know, it ends in a very satisfying way, which, I mean, all good stories deserve maybe not always a happy ending per se, but a satisfying ending. Although most books do kind of end with a happy ending. I'm trying to think if there are any books that end on a either neutral or blah ending that are like a series finale if it's a series, and I can't really think of any. Usually you leave a book feeling slightly hopeful. Although I don't know if it came from a book or not, but I can think of a couple of movies that ended with a huh ending. And the one that always comes to mind for me is City of Angels. I think it was from back in the 90s. I only watched it once, and that was mostly because I loved the soundtrack from it. And I was like, oh, this is going to be a great movie. And it is a really good movie, but oh my gosh, did that ending just. If you haven't seen it, the ending is kind of a downer, which I wasn't expecting when I went into it. And I kind of appreciate that it ended on a more that's life kind of realistic way, but it stands out in my mind as being like, huh. And now that I've been talking about it, I do know of one book that ends kind of on the same note. And it's ironic because it has a very fantastic movie adaptation that does not end the same way. And that's The Princess Bride, which is one of my favorite movies in existence. I can probably quote 90% of that movie. And the book is also fantastic. It has some hilarious parts. The book and the movie, they did such a good job adapting that, but the ending of the book is slightly different than the ending of the movie. It's very much the same, but where the movie fades to black and the credits roll, there's about another two paragraphs beyond that, and it's really funny. If you haven't read it, you totally should. And I think the reason that that one was adapted so well is because the person who wrote the book is also the person who wrote the screenplay and was very involved in all of it. That's a really good one. I don't know if any of you watch Dominic Noble. He's a fantastic YouTuber, and he does a series called Lost in Adaptation. I need to look through his back catalog and see if he has done a Lost in Adaptation on The Princess Bride. That might be a tomorrow thing for me to do, especially since it's supposed to be raining tomorrow. But what we are here to do today is finish this series, which I've already told you ends in a, I feel like at least, very satisfying way. But before we can get to the very satisfying ending, we have to recap chapter 18 of Lady Night by Tamora Pierce, and chapter 18 is titled Blayce. Now, if you remember, we left off with Kel fighting her way through an illusion after being injured by Stemmen. I mean, she got quite the nasty cut and is suffering from a little bit of blood loss, but she's made it through. She's unlocked the door and walked straight into her nightmare. And her nightmare, if you remember, was the workroom of the nothing man Blayce. And she walks in and she's like, yep, this is exactly where my nightmare was. There's giant's bones on a table. She can smell old blood. It's not cool at all. And she sees Blayce. She sees the nothing man. He is pacing back and forth in front of a perfectly ordinary hearth. He's not even looking as she comes through the door, and he's chewing on his fingernails. Side note, that is, and unfortunately I'm learning I can do it with dentures, that is something I was hoping that getting the dentures would break me of, because I don't chew my fingernails, but I chew the skin on the sides, and I always have. And it's gotten a little bit better, but I'm starting to learn that I can still chew on them, and I'm trying really hard to break that habit. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but I mean, I don't want to be anything like the nothing man. So Kel goes in, she sees the nothing man chewing on his thumbnail, and he thinks that she's Stenman. And he starts addressing her as Stenman, and he's speaking in Skarnan, and Kel answers him in common that she's not Stenman. Quoting from the book, the mage turned to stare at her, his brown eyes wide with shock. The hand he had been gnawing on went to his chest, and he held the other up to her, palm out, as she advanced on him. He was as pasty-skinned as she had dreamed, small and unhealthy looking, with nails bitten down to the quick of his fingers and strips of angry red flesh around them where he had picked away at bits of skin. His robes were ratty and stained, his brown hair short and uncombed. He addresses her and he's like, I don't know who you are, but King Magur will be terribly displeased to discover that you have broken my concentration, interrupted my work. You know, you get out and go fetch Stedman to me. Kel's like, is this guy serious? She lets him know that she doesn't answer to Stedman, and she just came because she's always wanted to see what a monster looks like. He looks at her for a minute, and he's like, you're not Skarnan, are you? Kel is so disappointed in this monster. Quoting again, he was the worst letdown of her life. She had expected someone with Numir or Dane's air of hidden power, or Duke Baird's suggestion of iron strength, not this rat-like creature. He truly was a nothing man. How could the gods have let this creature wreak so much havoc? He states the obvious by going, you're Tertullian, aren't you? And then he starts trying to mess with Kel's mind. First, he's like, oh, gods be praised, you've come to save me. You have no idea. King Magur has been forcing me to do this. They told me that they were going to kill me. You've saved me. Kel looks at him and she's like, liar. The lives I've saved are the ones of the children. You know, you're a monster. She even tells him that she always thought that the Stormwings were monsters, but no, compared to him, they are just what they were made to be. Then he tries a different tactic. He tries the, I did not choose where my greatness and my magic lay. Don't you think that I would rather be healing people, bringing rain, feeding the hungry? No, but the gods gave me a talent for necromancy, and I've got to work with what I have. Kel counters again that no, you like what you're doing. He tries another tactic and he's like, I am a great mage. You treat me with respect. Kel also is not noticing that he's fiddling with a pendant at his neck while he's trying to distract her. He again states that he is a great mage, and she counters with the fact that he's a child murderer, and that's the only thing she needs to know about him. She kind of notices that he's fiddling with the pendant, and it's kind of irritating to her because it keeps flashing in her eyes. Blayce tries yet another tactic, and he tries bribery. He's like, don't kill me too quickly. I'm sure your king would like some of these. If you bring me to your king, I bet he would absolutely be thrilled to have these killing machines on your side. Kel realizes quickly that he's only talking and trying all these different tactics because the thing that Numir had warned her of once, the pendant and kind of hypnotizing her, is starting to happen to her. She growls a little bit and just decides it's time. She swings her glaive at him and it passes right through him. Kel realizes that she has been discussing all of this and getting hypnotized, fascinated, whichever way you want to say it, by an illusion. I feel like, I mean, obviously this mage's talents lie in necromancy, but he's also actually pretty good at illusion. He also misgenders her. Obviously, she's wearing her helm, so who can blame him? And he doesn't know anything about heraldry, or he would have seen that she was a distaff knight and not a knight. But, you know, he tries once more, saying that she doesn't know anything about kings, you know. Kings love power, and he would be able to give her king lots more power. Then he lets her know that he might not even be in the room. You know, she's never going to find him, so basically it's his version of neener neener boo boo. And Kel curses herself for about 14 different kinds of idiot and pulls out her griffin feather headband. She holds it up to his face, and Blayce gets very nervous because he can see the power shining from them, but he knows that it's not Kel's power. She puts it on and she sees him. And she knows that she's got to finish this as fast as she can because A, she's losing blood, and B, if he starts fiddling with that pendant again, she might not be able to break free of his fascination spell. Quoting yet again, she brought up her glaive in a controlled slash, one-handed, part of the staff lined up against her arm to steady it. She caught Blayce at the knees, cutting the muscles behind them. He dropped and turned visible to her unaided eyes, his control over his invisibility spell gone. Kel seized her glaive two-handed and yanked the blade towards her, neatly beheading the Gallon. Then she kind of sways there for a minute and is just slightly dumbfounded. You know, she's like, that was it? She feels a little bit bad because he was unarmed, but he was a monster, and considering everything he's done, she gave him a much more merciful death than he deserved. Jump comes over to her. He's been wounded a little bit, but he is still Jump, and he comes over and points at a door that Kel had not noticed before. It wasn't the door that she came through. It was another door that looks quite familiar to her, and it's lined with a bright blue light. She realizes that somehow she's looking at the chamber of the ordeal. The face that is in the stone in the chamber looks up, its eyes glow yellow, and, quoting yet again, "Very tidy," its voice announced in her mind. "I said you would do it, and you have." Kel gripped her glaive until her fingers creaked inside of her gloves. "Yes, it's done," she said. "I fixed it. I killed a swordless man, and I saw a lot of good people murdered. Now you have your balance. I have the little ones, and you and I are quits, understand? Find someone else to do what you can't." "Yes, we are finished." "Do you think that that makes you free of your fate?" said the chamber. "You are the protector of the small. You see real people in the humans and animals overlooked by your peers. There will always be work for you." Kel scowls and argues a bit with the chamber. She's like, "Yeah, whatever. I mean, that's what being a knight is. I would never call myself anything stupid like protector of the small, but, you and I are quits. I am going to find my own way forward from here." She goes to leave, and she hears the chamber one more time. "God's all bless, Keladria of Middlin." She stepped outside. She was still in Blayce's keep. Before she could shut the door, the chamber added, with something that sounded like wicked humor, "Protector of the small." Kel grumbles a little bit. She is definitely suffering from blood loss. She is not feeling amazing, but now she knows it's time to get back to her people. She's leaving the chamber when she happens to notice the gray and orange cat that helped her to beat Stedman laying on the floor, to all intents and purposes, just forgotten there. She knows that it's foolish, but she doesn't want this valiant warrior to be left in the keep with the enemy. So she picks it up, puts it on her shoulder, and starts heading out towards where hopefully she can get healed. She sits down for just a moment because she starts getting lightheaded about halfway out, and she's like, "I'm going to just sit for a minute." She gently puts the cat on the floor next to her and closes her eyes, and that's the last thing that she remembers until sunrise the next day. She wakes up and finds herself on a pallet in the courtyard. The first thing that she sees is the storm wings out on the outer wall. They're watching with great disapproval as the Tortolans are building a funeral pyre for their dead. The Scarnans are all they've been left where they fell. You can tell that the Stormwings are at least hopeful they'll get some Scarnans. Kel sits up, and the dogs who were sitting around her pull the covers off of her. And Kel puts her hand down and discovers that the cat is not dead. It blinks at her and begins to purr. Tobe comes up and kneels down next to her with some bandages wrapped around him. And Tobe lets her know that the cat was only stunned. She wasn't dead. And one of the convict squad actually has a gift for healing animals, so the cat is good as new. Thank goodness, because darn it, animal deaths in books are one of those things that get me every single time. So the fact that our valiant kitty cat actually lived through this makes me happy. Unfortunately, one animal that doesn't live through it is Owen, the squire's horse, Happy. He's kind of very torn up about that, and who can blame him? Neil comes up and scolds Kel for allowing herself to be wounded, especially since he could only clean any of the germs out of her wound and stop the bleeding, because he has been healing nonstop and his gift is pretty well gone. Kel lets them know that they are going to gather everybody up. Thankfully, there are a lot of extra horses that they can now mount everybody on because she has a lot of refugees, and they're taking all of the villagers with them. And she's like, all right, we're rounding everybody up. We're going to move out. But before she does, she wants the entire keep burned. She wants it burned to the ground so that none of the Nothing Man's research can ever be used again. They do that and they move out. Kel thinks that when one of her soldiers is like, okay, well, we've burned the keep, we've burned our dead, what do you want us to do with the Scarnan dead? Kel debates burning them, and she looks up and she sees the Stormwings and makes a decision that is slightly controversial in Kel's character, I feel like, but at the same time, I don't blame her a bit. She leaves the Scarnan dead for the Stormwings. I think it's the first time she's ever done that. 5 days later, they are now back to the Vasa River. It took them a lot longer, even with the extra mounts, to get there because obviously the refugees and the children are not warriors or knights, and so they have to go a little bit slower. Kel makes sure to keep the sparrows and the dogs on scout because she doesn't actually want to be discovered behind enemy lines and have everybody recaptured, but they make it, and they make it decently. Neil goes and gets in touch with the spies who smuggle them back across the river, and that is where Kel starts thinking, now what? I mean, she deserted. Not only her, but Neil, Merrick, although Merrick has already been sent back, Owen, everybody has technically deserted. Quoting from the book, once they were in sight of Tortle, she considered deserting her people, but she knew that she couldn't. She owed it to the children to get them to a place of safety, for one, and for another, flight would mean that she took no responsibility for the things she had done, which was unacceptable. She had done what was necessary, and she would take the consequences. She wonders briefly if Neil and Owen are thinking the same things. Owen is feeling too heartsick over the loss of Happy, his horse, and Neil is still feeling too wrung out from almost using up his gift in all of that healing. So they move on. And as the boat gets to the Tortolan side of the Vasa, they see that they have a welcoming party. Kel looks across the river and she sees Lord Wilden, Lord Raoul, and Duke Baird with Merrick, Seaver, and Esmond, the knights that she had sent back with her refugees. Kel comes off of the boat and basically bows her head to Lord Wilden, and she's ready to accept her judgment. Neil and Owen come over and kneel down next to her. Jump and the sparrows all line up in front of Kel, and she's ready. She's ready to accept whatever Lord Wilden needs her to do, whether it's going up to Traitor's Hill and being hung, or whatever punishment she's willing to take it. She does hear Lord Raoul, who speaks to Sergeant Dom, and he's like, hey, Dom, don't tell me all these kids are yours and your squad's. I mean, some of them look a little old to be yours. Kel knows with their bantering back and forth that at least Dom had not lied to her. Lord Raoul did know exactly that they were going to help her. In fact, he ordered them to. So she knows whatever happens to her, Dom and his squad are going to be fine. Lord Raoul is also informed by Dom that he missed a jolly fight. But yeah, it's definitely good. Lord Wilden looks at them all and is like, all right, let me hear it. Well, Duke Baird is gathering up all of the children and letting them know that they're safe now, and he takes them off to be healed. Kel bows her head, and Lord Wilden looks at them and he's like, all right. Owen is the first one to speak. If you remember, Owen is Lord Wilden's squire, and he's pretty sure he is never going to be a knight now. In fact, he's pretty sure he's going to be killed. But he confesses to Lord Wilden that the horse that Lord Wilden had given him, Happy, got killed, and that he's sorry. And Lord Wilden's like, is that the only thing you have to say to me, that you're sorry that the horse got killed? Owen is like, no, I disobeyed you, I betrayed you, and I would do it again under the circumstances. No disrespect. But he says, sir, I do miss Happy. Sir Neil is then questioned by Lord Wilden, and Neil's like, no comment. And then Lord Wilden makes quite the speech, which makes me very happy. I believe, Owen, that you are familiar with my dislike of needless dramatics, Lord Wilden said. I am not about to declare you a traitor because the mount I gave you was killed in battle. He did what he was trained to do, and I am sad for the loss of a horse. He was one of the best I've ever raised. But I would be sorrier still for the loss of a squire in whom I can take pride. At that, Kel, Neil, and Owen are all like, sir? Because they were really expecting to be condemned. Lord Wilden lets him know that one of the hardest lessons any commander needs to take to heart is it's a very bad idea to give an order that you know is going to be disobeyed. Lord Wilden lets Kel know that if his mind had not been on other things, he would have known better, and he would have actually told her to go get her people, because he had put her people under her care, knowing that she would protect them and knowing her personally. And he can't, in all fairness, punish any who did that. Kel protests, and Neil pokes her very hard in the back of the head and says, for once in your life, will you take a gift without arguing that you aren't worthy of it? He lets Lord Wilden know that, she took a blow to the head. She's just feeling a little scattered. It's leading her to say odd things. Lord Wilden then actually kind of cracks a joke by saying, it pains me to say this, but for the very first time, I think I'm agreeing with you, Sir Neilin. Don't let it go to your head. Then he looks over at Owen and Neil and asks for a moment alone with Kel. Neil withdraws, and Owen looks at his Knightmaster and's like, you're not going to yell at her, are you, sir? Because, you can't yell at her. He's actually standing up to his knight, to his lord, his Knightmaster. Owen goes on that Kel does not deserve to be yelled at, not after everything that she did. Lord Wilden sighs and is like, I'm not going to yell at her. Will you please go away now? And so Owen goes and joins Neil as they leave. Kel then looks at Lord Wilden and is like, you have every right to yell at me, sir. I deserve it. Wilden took a step closer to her, cupped her head in both of his hands, and kissed her gently on the forehead. You are a true knight, Keladri of Middelin, he told her. I am honored to know you. He lets her know a little bit about what is going on in the greater part of the war, that apparently when she killed the Nothing Man, all of the killing devices across the land all ceased to function. So obviously it was something that he did that was keeping them going. He also lets her know that obviously the war is not over, but this is definitely going to turn the tide. And he asks, have you thought about what you're going to be doing now, where I'm going to assign you? And I am going to quote the last paragraph of this wonderful book. His question took Kel by surprise. She searched for a coherent answer until at last she said, my lord, up until we landed, I assumed my next assignment would be on Trader's Hill and not as a guard. Wilden nodded. Very proper. As your punishment, then, I assigned you to find ground for a new refugee camp, build it and run it. Continue to instruct the people in how to defend it. I give you the entire valley of the Greenwoods River as your sub-district of my command. You will hold it and make it safe against Scarnans and anyone else who thinks that these people would be easy pickings. And that is how the chapter ends, but not the entire book, because we do have an epilogue, and the epilogue takes place a couple of months later as Kel is surveying the wonderful walled fortified town of New Hope. You know, she didn't name it Haven 2.0. She has named her new refugee camp New Hope, but it's actually now a fortified town. She has done a fantastic job, and she has Fanch as her head woman. Merrick is still her outside commander who is patrolling the grounds. Tobe is still with her, and that's one of her regrets, is that Tobe is back to not trusting that she is not going to disappear. So everybody in the epilogue is getting ready, because after getting the town up and running, they are all headed to Fort Steadfast for an entire week. And Kel is, as Kel always does, fussing over whether or not everybody will do fine without her. Fanch lets her know that everything will be fine. Tobe lets her know that the shutters are closed, the bed is made, everything's good, let's go. Merrick is even going with her, and Merrick, who you remember still thought that commoners were not as good as nobles, has gotten to the point where he is now trusting his convict squad to run things while he is gone at Steadfast for a week. Everybody is ready to go. In fact, Neil is more than ready to go, because Neil is now betrothed to Lady Yukimi. Lord Raoul has betrothed himself to Bury, the commander of the Queen's Riders, and Princess Shikokami and Prince Rold will be wed very, very soon. So things are all working out really well. Inari, the little child seer who is now living in the town of New Hope, while Neil is running around and getting ready to go, lets them know that Neil's going to be having a daughter, and he really doesn't like surprises. Kel tells Inari that maybe we just don't tell him that. And that is pretty much where it ends. Kel is happy that all of her friends are having a wonderful romantic time. And Kel turns, and the last chapter, or the last paragraphs of this series are, Kel turned Hoshi to look up at New Hope's walls. She thought the battle flags and the shields taken from those Scarnans who had attacked her people that summer gave the walls a nice homey touch. They also served as a warning to any raiding parties that New Hope had teeth. "Kel," shouted Neil, "are you gonna dream all day? She's waiting on me." Lovers, thought Kel, rolling her eyes. At least that was one headache that she didn't have. She was about to tell Neil that he could wait when she remembered that she would get to see Dom while she was at Steadfast. And it would be nice to be able to sit and chat for a while without kidnapping, fights, and wars to distract them. And with that, she nudged Hoshi to a trot. And that is how the entire Protector of the Small series ends, with maybe not a romance. Like, there does seem to still be a crush on Kel's part, but if nothing else, a very good friendship. And I think that might be the thing that I appreciate, and I touched on this a little bit in the last My Thoughts section. I really appreciate that Protector of the Small, while there are threads of romance that run through it in various parts, that isn't the focus. Don't get me wrong, I love a good romance, but I don't like it when that is the sole focus of a book. And I really do like Protector of the Small for the balance that it brings. I also really like this series because it is so grounded. I mean, Kel is not a mage. She is not half god. She's not a spy master. She doesn't have the second sight. She is determined, but not magically special. And I really like that about her. You know, she fights against the odds and wins. And she feels very grounded. Like, she has her flaws. Obviously, everybody has flaws, but she overcomes them. Even to the fear of heights, it's not something that climbing the needle just makes go away. It still affects her even 2 books later. She's still afraid of heights. She just deals with it, which is something I feel like I could maybe take lessons in. And to that end, in maybe the next couple weeks, if we cool down a little bit, I might actually start riding my bike again. I'm not afraid of bikes, and that really is nothing like being afraid of heights, but I am afraid of falling off of it and hurting myself. Being 50, it's such an exciting time in life. And I was like, you know what? If Kel can deal with her fear of heights, maybe I can deal with my fear that I am going to fall off a bike while riding way too fast and actually hurt myself bad enough that I can't do anything. So here's to Christine trying out bike riding again at the tender age of 52. If Kel can do it, maybe I can too. And I feel like that is the coolest recommendation from any book series. If it makes you do something that maybe you're a little bit apprehensive about just because you admire the character so much. And so that is the lesson I am taking from the Protector of the Small series. That and the fact that obviously you protect anything that needs protecting. Although we don't really usually have the option to do things like that. But we can be braver and to be more like Kel in our real lives. At least that's what I'm going to tell myself. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I know this wasn't how we planned on ending this series, but I feel like the chapter recaps, while not as great as a full read through, still at least give you guys the gist of it. And again, I do recommend, if you can find all of Tamora Pierce's books, to go out and read them yourselves, because they're a great read. And every time I reread them, I feel like I pick up something new and something different, which is the mark of a good book. But with that, thank you so much for listening. I hope that you really enjoyed the ending of Kel's saga. Leave me a thumbs up if you don't mind. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I will see you next time.